Okay, welcome to a semi-impromptu Tuesday afternoon stream here in Denver. I like to stream on these wintry days that we sometimes have in the spring. It was like 70 degrees, 48 hours ago, and it's going to be almost 80 degrees coming up in the weekend, and yet we get like an inch of snow. So that's Colorado and Denver for you. Great place to live, but sometimes the weather can go on unpredictably up and down. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about, the rumor mill, about what's coming. I think that we're in the dark a little bit right this moment, but certainly there's some clues and things we can conjecture about. And if anyone has any other questions or things they want to talk about, then by all means, let's do anything and everything logic related today. If you're not subscribed, then make sure you do that if you like this kind of content so you can be notified. Hit that little bell. In the description, there's a link to the membership for the channel. We've got some really great members on there. We do bonus streams every week, and they're going to be getting one of their first bonus instruments over the weekend. And that's a great little community of extra time in live streams, getting personalized questions answered and things like that. So, and also just one-on-one lessons. If you want more, then there's a link down there as well. Okay, so we are due for an update. We are currently about 2 months since the most recent teeny update, which tried to fix flex pitch on the latest operating system on Silicon Macs. And ironically, that fix did not work reliably with anybody. And I still have all kinds of issues with flex pitch. Maybe we should start there for a couple minutes, just talking about some of the issues that we're all currently having. I have had more bugs in my current setup than I've had for a number of years. One of them that drives me crazy is if I have a bunch of tracks on my project and I delete one of the tracks, like in the mixer window, sometimes it shifts all of the plugins to the adjacent track. It's infuriating why that would happen. And then it's like I've got to rebuild my entire session. And so I've been doing a lot more saving of late. And then of more recent times, I just stopped deleting tracks. It's like I just take out the instruments if I'm worried about processing, but I don't delete any tracks anymore because it's done so many weird, bizarre things. On top of that, flex pitch is just nearly non-functional, meaning I can record something in a project and it may or may not analyze it, and then I can have it reanalyze it, and then half of the time it'll just do half of analysis, or it'll go back to where it puts all the little flex boxes regions in one row, no matter what the pitches are. I mean, those kind of things drive me crazy. And it feels a little bit like we're in one of those cycles where they're working on the new thing, right? They're working on a bigger thing and hoping that that new shiny toy will distract us from some of the bugs that we're dealing with. And they're probably right. I'm not going to complain when some new shiny things come out, but I hate having to always sort out what's working and what's not working, and then making like a mental list of all the workarounds I have to do on a daily basis. And so, what maybe we should start with all of you. There's a few of you watching now. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Free from Germany. And what are some of the bugs that you're faced with right now that you wish would be fixed? I know everybody's got their favorite ones still, but have there been anything new and surprising in your world? Anything new that you may not have faced in the past. Put it in the chat because I'd love to hear some of the things you're facing. And then at the same time, what we expect to happen. And here's the trend with Apple of late, right? I've done a number of videos about their upgrade schemes. I went through every update since Logic 10 was released. And I looked at every single cycle, every single thing that they did in their release notes. And I learned a lot by that. They've spent a lot of time incorporating percussion and beat making tools into Logic. They've done all the sampling things. They've done the live loops. We added the flex and have incorporated flex into so many things. We've over time added some new instruments and effects, but not tons. Since Alchemy and the studio strings and horns, not a ton, but they've always had a good amount of those. But a lot of stuff really aimed at those who are doing like beat making and song production in the pop styles. And so I don't necessarily think that that's going to change with any new versions. However, I do think that there are some clues as to what is likely to come next. One of the big clues would be some of the AR VR tech. When spatial audio with Apple Music was released, a lot of the next few updates in Logic were to support that. Now we can do spatial audio mixing, and we have head tracking with the Apple headphones, and all of the Dolby Atmos workflow, exporting, importing, the object mixer, all of that stuff came in right around the same time that we got spatial audio on Apple Music. And then update after update, they were adding enhancements and making it better and fixing the bugs around this. And then the actual Apple renderer engine for that, so you could actually monitor exactly what people were hearing when they were listening to this on Apple headphones through Apple Music. That came on board, and the head tracking functionality, so you moved your head and the audio stayed locked so you could actually hear the Dolby Atmos stuff. All of that stuff came on board. And so I don't think, if anything else, that we should expect something different than that trend. And that means with the rumored release of the AR VR headset that Apple's doing, it's likely that some of that spatialized audio functionality is going to continue to develop to support creators who are making content for that platform. I mean, Apple wants that platform to succeed, and yet they don't have a lot of tools that people can use. It's like people are going to be using other people's software to create content at the beginning, right? That's no good. So Final Cut will get a bunch of more of these features. Logic will help support some of those features. There's just no way around it. I mean, it's going to be some more tools that have to do with that. So that'll be one piece of this conversation, is what other projects are Apple working on that Logic Pro can support, and that's certainly one of them. And they keep on doing more and more with the spatial audio. They're definitely digging into it. They just released their new classical music app, and with that, they definitely are pushing that style or those styles of music into spatial audio. And once again, I mean, they're not backing down. I think that I don't know how successful it really is. I'd love to see data. I know a lot of people listen to music and spatial audio almost accidentally or by default. And so because of that, it's like a self or reinforcing, self-oscillating, position where that's just happening because they've given it to people and the headphones that people buy work with it. And so it's like people are doing it, but how many of them are doing it intentionally? How many of you went out and bought a pair of the nicer Apple ear pods or the Maxes, or how many of you done that just so you can have better spatial audio, right? I think it's probably a small number, is my guess. But of course, let me know in the comments if any of you are like, no, I'm all in on Apple Music because it's spatial. It's unlikely, and it's unlikely that people are listening to Apple Music instead of Spotify because of that. In fact, most of my students at the university are on Spotify or other platforms, and whenever I share a link with Apple Music, none of them are like, everybody's like, I don't use that. We don't use that. So I think it's interesting. Thomas is saying, here's a bug I saw. Record audio, screw up playing, then hit undo, not delete. It removes the recording and removes it from the audio file shown in Logic Browser, but the file stays on your hard drive under media and takes space. I must have a lot of dead files around and didn't notice until recently. Maybe it's a feature. Sometimes I have noticed something similar, and I can't tell you if it's actually the way that what you're noticing, but sometimes the undo feature keeps files around, and then maybe after like a restart and a reboot of Logic, they would go away. I don't know if they're going away at all because I haven't specifically noticed that one. But that seems like a really easy bug to have missed by somebody if they're not paying attention because it's not so obvious. So spatial audio, it's always going to be a part of this. Here's the problem. A lot of places are trying to do podcasts in spatial audio, and I wouldn't be surprised, or I haven't tracked the Apple podcast space for this recently, but the problem is that there's too much movement sometimes. And so it becomes a real big pain in the butt if you're trying to listen to something and some of the sound design or music bed or whatever is in spatial audio. Because then, unless there's a mechanism to keep the voice locked in one position, it moves around too as you move your head, and that can be really distracting. And so there's the sound that's part of a scene, and then there's like the narration or voiceover, which isn't part of that sonic scene, and the two should be independent from each other. So on YouTube, if you're doing spatial audio with a 360 video, you can actually have some of the sound locked into the 360 sphere, but then you can also lock any voiceover or other sounds into a locked position so that no matter where you move your head, the voice stays in your ears exactly the same. And so all these platforms need to actually figure out how to make that work. So far, Apple hasn't done anything that we know about to make some of those details kind of get sorted out. It feels like they're always slightly after or late to the party, and they let other people kind of figure some of this out. But it makes working in Logic Pro for some of those things a little bit more tedious because it's not directly designed with some of that functionality in mind. Kind of a pain in some ways. So we're expecting more to come with this in the next version of Logic for sure. We're expecting, now that we've had a number of software platforms do more with what they're calling AI, an actual, just in some ways smart design, I would call it, or just design in general, because sometimes AI is taken out of context in terms of what that means. And machine learning, everyone likes to throw around that word and think it means something super special. But in reality, what we're looking at are smart instruments and smart tools, things that aid in the process themselves. And so it's not just leaving it all up to the human factor, but the software actually does some of the functionality for us. whether it's through a true AI scheme or a machine learning process or what, it doesn't matter. It's the software is listening, analyzing, and implementing some form of processes in the scope of what you're asking it to do. So you say to, one of our instruments, I just want to play a note and I want you to create like an arrangement for this. Or I want, like some of the AI vocalists that we've looked at where we play in a note, we type in the words, and the software handles making it sound like a human. Or we have an equalizer and we say, you know what, this equalizer, I'm putting it on a drum kit. I want you to make the drums sound like it's in a rock style. And so it analyzes what the drums are doing. It changes the low, mids, and high frequencies to match what is expected in that style. And so that's more like, I think, the direction a lot of musical tools are going. It's like aiding in the process, and it doesn't matter if they call it machine learning or AI or what. It's just software enhanced production. And so I'm expecting more and more of that to come from something like Logic as we move down that road. I mean, that's something Apple's interested in. They love having our hardware and software do stuff for us. I mean, that's OS 10 and iOS and iPad OS, all of those things like to set the rules and then enforce them, So I think that should be getting a lot of that stuff in the future if they're really investing in it. And so that's the question. I mean, it's like one day, are we going to wake up and Apple's going to say, this has been great. It's been great fun. And we're not really focusing on this anymore. Perhaps like with Facebook right now, Facebook's big gamble with virtual reality, right? With the Oculus headset, that's now the Meta headset. They woke up one day and realized that they had put $1 billion into something that people weren't interested in. Not really, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many people sit around my house looking at an iPhone, an iPad, or an iPod, or even a laptop, or me on my computer. And we have one of the Meta headsets. And it's like I have to charge it for the weekend if one of the kids wants to use it. They're not. I mean, they're into it, but they're not. It's like there's too much of an effort to have to set that up. And so Facebook put all this money into something and all of a sudden woke up one day and now they're cutting prices and cutting teams and people are losing their jobs. It's like one bad decision by a tech company like that, one really big bad decision has cost them a lot of money and people's livelihoods. And so is Apple about to make that mistake with their VR, AR headset? Probably not to the same degree, but I just don't know. People aren't really interested in some of that stuff. I mean, how many of you want to carry around a headset and use that instead of a phone wherever you go? And Free says, please no AI, make music yourself. I don't I don't care personally one way or the other. I think that the good music that I want to listen to is made by humans. Even if there's tools, it could be like an equalizer, not like the audio equalizer, but like the social equalizer, where somebody who has really innovative, insightful musical ideas doesn't have the ability to have the training to make music. It doesn't make them any less musical. It doesn't make them any less intuitive. It could take some of their ideas and make some incredible stuff. Now, should we tell everyone, well, you can't make music unless you put in the time to do it? I don't think that necessarily a good or bad thing. I think that certainly there are lots of careers in this world where I want people to put in the time. I don't want to be in an operation with a doctor who doesn't understand their tools and just used AI to get through school. You know what I mean? I want them to have spent the time and learned how to actually do the procedures that they're doing so that I don't die. It's a little different with music. I think that there can be some people who have some like really great intuitive musical ideas, and the software helps with it. Do I want software creating all of the music? I don't think it'll be good. And I don't think it'll be worth listening to for the most part. And I want the option of being able to go see somebody who's amazing perform and see them on a stage interacting with the audience. And, probably in 50 years, there'll be AI that's outperforming on stages and places and good. Who cares? I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. So we'll see exactly what's happening with that. For Logic, we are more than certainly going to be getting some more beat making and music production tools in the next major version. That's just something that's been a trend with this, and it's important to the team developing Apple. It's like, who have they bought recently that they're going to implement this with? What sampling wizardry can we do with it? What musical instruments? We have a lot of musical instruments, right? I mean, we have a lot of cool percussion synths and synthesizers and sample based tools. We can make just about any instrument we want in here, and they all sound good. They don't all sound great, but they sound good. And it's like we have notation if you want to read music. We have step sequencers. We have auto tune. All of those things need to work better. Not all of them are perfect. They could all improve. And so perhaps we're going to be getting improvements on all of those. But if they are going to add some stuff, if they're going to say, look at the shiny new thing. And the other kind of methodological approach to understanding what Apple does is the power of the computer versus the needs of the software. And I run into this right now with my Mac Studio Ultra. That thing hasn't even broken a sweat when using anything Logic related. And so they need to do something that's going to really push them over the top. And so with this, if they just do a little bit more of the same and keep everything running the same, everyone's going to be like, great, we don't need a new computer. We can run this on the current thing for a long time. And that's not going to help people buy more computers. One of the thought processes behind Logic Pro and even Final Cut, you buy it once, you get all these updates. When they finally add that thing that pushes it over the top, and the most recent example would be Atmos. You had to have a Silicon Mac to really run it, or to run it. And the head tracking feature was all silicon based. And so you had to upgrade to one of the new M1 or M2 computers to even run these things. That was like, that's the gateway, right? We'll give you the free update. You're going to buy a new computer. It's like the unspoken agreement. In the past, Alchemy was something like that. I mean, Alchemy's a beast. And they didn't trim it down. They didn't make it more lightweight. They really just made it harder. And so if you wanted to use Alchemy, and there was like Sculpture and any of these other instruments, all the sampling stuff, they added more sampling. They put flex pitch and flex time in the samplers. All of those things take up more power. And so they say, okay, great. We'll give you this stuff, unspoken agreement. If you want to actually use it all, you need a new computer. And so that's the question about this. They can't just add a few more of the exact same things, because none of that's going to push anybody over the top. They are going to give us some really cool things. Some of the, like, for instance, what they have on GarageBand iOS with some of the smart instruments, if they were to do like real world-class versions of those, like the drummer, but even more impressive, those could legitimately push some people over the top to have to buy the new computer. It's going to look so cool and be so powerful, and yet it won't work on something that's 5 years old. That's the sweet spot, giving great value, but in exchange, you have to get the new beast. Mixar Band says, I hope they add more to the Dolby Atmos stuff. It is pretty basic right this moment. And Craig Parker says, considering a few people, including myself, have had a plugin scan stall when opening Final Cut after the last Mac OS update, I would say some changes are on the way. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things. It's so frustrating. I feel like they're still changing the software to work in the universal mode, even though it's universal. And I wonder how many of the plugins now that I need that are still requiring Rosetta. I've got one on the screen right here, actually. And part of the reason it's on the screen is because I was just running through some tests with the Reason Rack, but it still requires Rosetta. They were talking early on about how they were working on getting it universal, and then they're like, I don't know. This is one of the last things I need to work and become universal before I can turn off Rosetta permanently. So right now I'm still running a compromise, and it's not Apple's fault. I mean, they did change everything, but it's great changes. I mean, the new silicon stuff works so well when everything's programmed correctly and it's not compromised with Rosetta. And so as soon as that's done, as soon as they say, you know what, we're now universal, then I'll be able to turn off Rosetta, and I'll see how many of the crashes and other things still are happening. Because I have suspicion that much of my issues are just because of Rosetta rather than, the basic flaws in the coding. Let's see. Sheriff Vlog says, did you see all music must be published in Atmos or Sony 360 by 2024? If not, Apple won't put you in a playlist on editorial playlist. Interesting. Nice. Well, my small amount of music on Apple Music is not in Atmos or Spatial, and so I'm not expecting it to be put on playlists anyway. But I think that's a really interesting. I'll have to check out the video you're talking about. I do think I don't know. So here's the one of the main ways I get a feel for the music industry. In our program at the university, we've got over 500 music students, all doing music industry studies, and there's a few of them who are really interested in the spatial side of things as an academic exploration. But the bands and the students making music to release, they don't care. Not really. They might care a little bit, but they're not. It's not like their main goal. They're in it for the music and for the shows, and all the rest of that is just like hoops to jump through. And so I don't know. I think it's a mistake when everything can be so compatible and so backwards compatible. I think it's a mistake to lay any sort of ultimatums down. But that's just me. I think Apple too often is like right now. I'm on Facebook because there's a few groups on there that I like. There's a cooking group I'm a part of, and there's a Hey Audio Student, which I'm a part of, and then there's some Logic Pro support groups that I'm a part of, and my parents. I post pictures so my parents can see what we're up to with their grandkids, right? And so I don't sit on Facebook and think this is the ultimate place. It's like the generation above me it's their platform in many ways. And so I feel like Apple trying to dictate spatial music as a format is just going to make Apple Music less relevant to certain generations and groups of people. So much. I'll check it out, Sheriff Vlogs. You're talking about right now the Warner Chapel telling all the A&R and managers. It's also wishful thinking to a certain degree. We all saw what happened this last week with Waves and how they went to a subscription only and said that that was it. And then like 2 days later, they had changed their mind. Stuff like that. I mean, it's great. You can do, here's the thing. You can export a stereo track into spatial audio, into the format and not do very much mixing in actual Dolby Atmos or spatial audio. And it's going to be up in that format unless their tools are analyzing to make sure you have an interesting mix in Dolby Atmos. That's different. But if it's just the format itself, having the right number of channels, and then great. I mean, it's super easy to do a really lame spatial audio mix. It's super easy. Let's see, is the 8 gig RAM Mac Mini base model enough? It's the only thing I can afford. My purpose is to edit videos and record covers. Sure. I mean, it's not quite enough. But that's the one I first got when the Silicon was released. I got the 8 gig M1 Mac Mini, and I did a lot of projects and a lot of videos, and it worked really well. And Fabrizio says, I feel like mixing Atmos hasn't been fully established yet. No, and actually some of the earliest mixes that have been coming out sound horrible, and they're not interesting, and it's more of a distraction. It's like 3D, right? Go to a movie that was made for 3D, and then there's always that one scene where it's like somebody has a spear or a bow and arrow, and it like pokes out of the screen right at you, and you could tell they did it just because it's in 3D. It's like, that's not storytelling. That's a gimmick that's stupid. There should be a reason for all of this stuff, and the reason should be for audio that it's musical and that it's interesting. Anyway, we could go on. This is going to be a shorter stream today. Just wanted to start this conversation, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit more over the next few weeks as we, move towards the new release. And it's coming. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Whether or not it's what we want or if it's something different, that's going to be what we talk about and what we look at. But it's not so simple. And I think it's going to be the more updates we get, there's going to be this division between people who decide whether they really want to be on Apple stuff or not. And if they want to be with a smaller, hungrier audio company, someone who's doing stuff because they really believe in what the end users are doing. And I think Apple thinks it does. I think Apple really believes that it cares about the end users, but I've used too many of their products to know that it's just too big of a company with too many moving pieces for that really to take place. I mean, right now, Spotify, this is going off the comment from Sheriff. Spotify is still winning right this moment. And I turn off spatial audio on almost all of my mixes when I'm listening on my headphones. The only time I'm using the head tracking and spatial capabilities of the Apple headphones is with my Apple TV when I want to listen to a surround sound, spatial Dolby Atmos mix of a movie. I think that part of the technology is incredible. I think for music, until they sort out some of the finer details of this, I think it's still too much of a gimmick and not enough of a draw. And my car doesn't have Atmos either. Okay, thanks so much, everybody, for watching. And like I said, if you're interested in this kind of stream, I do evening streams sometimes. We're doing another one for our Can You Hear It podcast tomorrow night, where we're going to be doing some blind listening of some of the features of Logic and asking listeners and viewers to see if they can figure out what it is they're hearing. That type of ear training is so critical for Logic users and musicians, and so check that out. There's one we did last week, and I think it went really well. So we do another one this Wednesday, and we're going to just do a series of these once a week, and then we do songwriting sessions in the evening in various styles using various techniques, always fresh, original, improvised stuff, nothing that's prepared in advance. But if you're interested in any of that, then just make sure you're subscribing and consider joining our membership. So I'll talk to you later, everybody. Later.